Hope for Anxiety and OCD, episode 33. This is your host, Carrie Bach, and in case you're new to the show, we're all about reducing shame, increasing hope, and developing healthier connections with God and others. Today is a very special show as I am joined by my husband, Steve Bach. He is saving my bacon because we had an episode that I was going to come out and the recording just didn't come out very good, and I didn't feel comfortable putting it out there into the world for you guys to listen to. So he decided to come up with some questions that our listeners might be interested in related to being a therapist. Welcome back, Steve.
I'm happy to be here. You did not ask me to be here, which makes it different this time. I had suggested it because, as with anything, we get in a pinch sometimes. As your husband, I have an obligation to try to help where I can, so I suggested, well, why don't you just let me ask you a bunch of questions and see how it goes?
You're very helpful, as always.
You are all too kind.
So what's up? I haven't seen these questions ahead of time, so what do you have for me?
Okay, well, Carrie, today is your day to be on the couch. You know, as a therapist, you have people on the couch, right? And you talk to them, and they just open up to you.
Now they're on their own couch online.
Now they're on their own couch online, and they get to be in the comfort of their own home or their own car. Or today you're on the couch. The questions are for you, except I'm not per se trying to help you in that sense. I'm no therapist. God knows I'm not a therapist. So, Carrie, what is it about therapy and helping people, being their therapist? What is it that you like about that?
Wow. The biggest thing for me is just the life transformation that I get to see in people, like watching them come in a lot of times pretty hopeless. I feel like I'm at the end of my rope and everything I've tried, I just haven't gotten better. I've done maybe some self-help or talked to some friends or maybe just tried to do everything internally themselves. And then they get to this pivotal point where they reach out for help to someone. And as you get to know people week after seeing them on a regular basis, you know, there's just an element where your care and concern for someone that you have in the beginning, it grows, obviously, over time, the more time that you spend with people. And I want to see my clients succeed. I want to see them do well. And so when they come in after working with me for some time and they have a smile on their face and they haven't been smiling in a long time, or they say, hey, I had a win this week. You know, this is what happened. I was able to have an OCD thought come in, and I knew it was OCD this time, and I just was like, okay, I'm going to let that thought pass. Or they come in and say, yeah, that situation that normally would have really triggered me and made me anxious, it didn't make me as anxious this week. I was able to kind of catch my breath and breathe through it. So it's all these little opportunities to see people really change the trajectory of their lives. And I know it's not just for their lives, it's for their kids' lives, it's for their marriages that are being changed. And that just lights me up and makes me want to go to work every day.
Okay. Well, for those who maybe haven't listened much to you, or like me, they've heard it but haven't really listened, what is it that you do? Do you just give everybody therapy?
I definitely don't give everybody therapy. That would be out of my scope of practice. And it's funny because I used to get calls all the time for marriage counseling, I think because I was a Christian. And I would have to tell people, hey, I don't do marriage counseling at all. In fact, I haven't done marriage counseling since I was in my practicum in graduate school. And I'm pretty sure those couples are not together anymore. I would not be a good person to do marriage counseling. I also don't work with addictions or anybody that has a severe anorexia or something of that nature. I don't work with. My tagline that I tell people is that I am a Christian therapist who helps people with anxiety and OCD overcome wounding childhood experiences in order to live more full lives. And I do that now in the comfort of their own homes via online therapy.
As Carrie Bach, you wake up, and I know this, pretty early in the morning. You're not a lazy person. You get up, you put a lot of preparation into what you do. You have a plan, you have ideas. You don't share those with me because in your world you can't. So you keep that all mustered up inside somewhat. The first person that you meet with comes along and something's already probably gone wrong. Somebody's at the front door knocking on the door while you're trying to be in session, or a cat wants in or out, or whatever the case is. You deal with that. Not a big deal. You handle that. Things go on all throughout the day, though, that are out of your control, and you have to somehow keep enough sense about you to help someone. And you do very, very well at it, I think. The first session goes by. You've absorbed everything that individual has said. Now you're going to session 2. Same thing. Session 3, session 4. Maybe you get a lunch. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you've just scarfed down lunch. You've tipped your food in your mouth and now you're running back to go meet with someone, you know? How do you not go nuts? Like, how do you take all of that in, absorb it all, and then calmly say, and how does that make you feel? Because I've got that in my head that you say that. I bet you never say that, but
No, therapists don't just have one line that they say. That's so annoying. Wow. So how do I get through the day-to-day seeing multiple people with multiple problems and hearing all their stories? That's a really good question. Well, first thing I will say about the lunch, I'm not a person that scarfs down food and runs back to work. For me, lunch is more of a time. A lot of times now that I'm home, I get to go in and I'll cook a little something. It doesn't have to be anything major, but lunch is kind of my downtime, my relaxed time where I can clear my head a little bit or shift gears and think about something different. As far as the seeing one person and then the next, sometimes sessions can be really heavy. Like you're talking about some pretty traumatic things or the person was very emotional. And that can be hard, I think, to transition and shift gears. For me, it can look like a lot of different ways. It can look like maybe getting up in between sessions and stretching. Sometimes it's just going to get a drink of water. Obviously, I have to go to the bathroom throughout the day, those types of things that I do in between session to kind of help reset. One of the things that's helped me probably the most as a therapist that I realized a long time ago was that these are not my problems. They're other people's problems, because I was such a empathetic person that I would take on other people's problems as my own. And even when I was in the early days of working in community mental health, essentially I felt like the message was, you've got to fix these people. You've got to make them better. Like whatever you have to do that, you have to bend over backward. I really got burnt out in that job, and I didn't even realize that I was burnt out. I didn't have the self-awareness to know that. Through that process, though, of going to my own therapy, I realized I have to take a step back and take the wide angle view, really to say, at the end of the day, these people are living with these problems on a day-to-day basis, and I'm here to help them. I'm here to support them. But I'm not here to fix them, and I'm not here to fix their problems. I'm here to be kind of the guide and the person that walks alongside them and shows them potential different paths that they can take. But I can never make anyone do anything. There's something really freeing about recognizing that everything is optional. People want to dive in and do the work, then I'm happy to help them do that. If they're not ready to do that, that's okay. And I can be patient and wait with them until they are ready to dive into some things. I think for me, because my therapy is less of insight-based and more action-based, that the people who aren't quite ready to take action they either don't tend to see me or they tend to drop out, one of the two. But hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. And that leads me to another question, actually. We all need help from time to time, right? Mm-hmm. You're around me enough. You know that I tend to store things in. I'm not going to tell. I'll tell you. I'll complain to you all day. But I'm not going to tell people my problems. I'm not good at that, right? There are people who I am sure have a problem, and they don't recognize it. There's an outcome of it. they're aggravated and they don't know why, or they're doing something to themselves that they shouldn't, or saying things they shouldn't, or treating a spouse or a family member, whatever, in a bad way, or whatever it may be. But what do you tell them to notice those types of things? Like, at what point should a person notice that, if that makes sense?
Are you talking about how do people become self-aware enough to realize that they need therapy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. See, you put it so much better than I did. That was like, anyways. I say it in like 5,000 words. You say it in like 10 or less. But yes.
Well, we always look at the different domains of a person's life, and I think that you just named some of those off. So when you're looking at what do your relationships look like? Like, are you satisfied in your relationship with your spouse or significant other? What is your work like? Are you getting in trouble at work because you can't get along with your coworkers? And then the other would be maybe school, if the person is in school. You know, a lot of times when kids are failing, it's not just because they don't understand the subject matter. Sometimes they have emotional things going on or mental health struggles that they're dealing with. So we look at those kind of different domains of life. What's someone's functional level at home? Are they just laying in the bed all day depressed on a Saturday and really all they can do is go to work and go home? You know, that might be an indication that someone needs therapy. It's just a level of, usually people seek help when one of those domains is impacted in some way, shape, or form. Like, okay, my anxiety is at the point where it's affecting my ability to drive to and from work because I'm afraid of driving on the interstate. Or, you know, my OCD is impacting my relationship with my spouse because I'm having all of these obsessions about my spouse, and then I'm seeking reassurance from them. Just some couple examples there.
On a similar question, what advice would you give someone if they had a family member or a friend? Of course, we all think the other person needs help and not us, but how would, you know, sometimes you see people and you're like, man, they really need some help, honestly. And not in a mean or a cruel way, like, oh dear, oh my, go get some help. No, it's, you know, you're not trying to be mean, but they really do need help. What advice do you give somebody? Because that type of a thing is usually, I would think, you bring up that topic and they are going to let you have it. I don't have a problem. Who do you think you are? And it's one of those things that probably could split a family or a marriage or whatever up. What advice do you give somebody to reach out to their friend or their family member and say, hey, you need help?
If you know what the barrier is, I think that it's a little bit easier. For example, if someone's saying, well, I don't have time to go to therapy, then you might present them with some different options. There are therapists that keep all different kinds of hours. Well, maybe we can find you someone that works on the weekends. Maybe we can find you someone that works late into the evening. If it's a financial barrier, trying to figure out, okay, well, are there some things that we could look into, some lower cost, sliding scale, university counseling center, EAP program through your work? Like, okay, let's try to remove that barrier to therapy. If it's a matter of, well, I'm not really that bad, I think that's probably the thing that keeps most people out of therapy is like, well, yeah, I've got some obsessions, but there's that person over here that I'm comparing myself to, and they really can't function. They're washing their hands 20 times a day. I'm just over here, you know, ruminating about stuff, staring off into space. It's not really affecting me as bad. It's not really great to compare us to other people. It gets us in all kinds of troubles in a variety of ways. But I think that's probably the biggest thing that keeps us out of therapy is pride, because it takes a certain level of humility to say, you know, I really might benefit from getting out of my own head and talking with someone. And maybe I do need some help. It's hard for people to admit. I think if that's your family member, really my first step would be a spiritual one, would be to pray about it and to say, okay, God, I believe that this person really could benefit from help. And will you please soften their heart so that when this opportunity presents itself, then they might be more open. One of the nice things about having the podcast is it's really been a bridge for some people to seek out therapy. I've had emails from various people saying, "Hey, I heard your podcast, and this was what I realized about myself. I was listening to someone else's story. Then I realized, hey, that's me. I have some of those same thought processes in my head, or I'm going through some of those same struggles with anxiety." They hear a story about how someone else sought out help, and hey, this person sounds pretty normal. They sound okay, and I consider myself pretty normal. And hey, this therapist lady, she doesn't sound awful or weird or kooky. Maybe I could go seek help. So that's one of my prayers, I think, for the podcast. And one of the beautiful things that's come out of it is people are writing and saying, hey, I am going to go to therapy after listening.
That's actually helpful. And I think a lot of your listeners would probably think that very same thing, because I think we all have people in our lives that we come across that, and maybe even ourselves, maybe we were thinking of someone and it turns out, oh, maybe I need some help. So that's good. I'll ask you this. What is something that an individual should do prior to getting therapy? They're looking for that therapist, and do they call just any therapist? Do they start by calling the therapist first? What do they do?
Yes. Thank you for asking me this question.
I knew that one. That was actually the first question I wanted to ask you, but
this is something that Steve has to hear me vent about a lot, because people often do not do the research before they just start kind of calling willy-nilly the closest person to them that they can Google. We have an entire episode actually on this, and I can't remember the number, but it's how to find the therapist who's right for you. I also wrote an ebook about this topic that you can find in the store on finding a therapist who's the right fit for you on the first try. I'll give a couple of key points. You need to kind of think through, what is it that you're looking for in terms of what you're looking for from a therapist, as well as how are you going to pay for therapy over time? Is it something that you are trying to get your insurance to pay for? Can you afford to pay out of pocket? What's your monthly budget? All of those factors really need to be taken into consideration before you start calling people. Please, please, please use the internet. It's a beautiful tool out there. Do your web searches. Find out as much information as you can online. If you need certain requests, such as scheduling, insurance, you're going to have to ask your boss to leave early at the end of the day. Get some of those things in place and so forth. Know what your therapist that you're looking at specializes in. That's a big one. I just talked about people seeking me out for marriage counseling, and there was nothing on my website or anywhere in anything that said anything about marriage. So like I said, a lot of times people just start calling numbers, and honestly, that's going to lead you to more frustration in the long run if you don't do your research. Use websites, get as much information as you can from there, and then start calling or emailing.
Fair enough. And for the record, I probably sit on the wrong side of that. I have this wonderful wife who is very good in helping me find doctors and find what our insurance covers and what it does not, and I am very, very thankful for that. And my advice to you, if you are the one sitting there like me and saying, oh my gosh, I'm terrible at that, I am all the bad things that she just named, get help from your spouse, your friend, somebody, because it's worth it. So thank you for helping me on that. I think is good.
And I try to be patient and remind myself that people are in crisis, and when people are in crisis, they don't retain information very well that they read, or they don't always make the best decisions. So.
Sure. So let's get back to you. We talked earlier about your day-to-day. When you get up and you plan and oh my gosh, 15 things have already gone wrong in my day. Then you do all this therapy throughout the day. Then you're finished. You have to put up with this husband of yours who comes home and says, oh my goodness, let me tell you about my dandy day, And not that I want to complain about things, but we all do. And then you say, well, all right, let's eat dinner, let's talk. and then you have work to do, or you have an idea, or you have to, whatever it is, because we're busy. Our lives are busy. Where do you get your go? I don't know another way to put that. Where do you get your energy to continue?
Exercise is a big one for me. I really try to exercise 3 times a week. And you know that because
Yep.
you live with me and you see me do it. And I have streaming workouts that I do. Sometimes we'll take walks as well. And that's always good. The walks for clearing my head. If I'm with you, I'll talk to you about different ideas that I have for the podcast or things that I want to do business-wise. And then if I'm by myself, I'm usually either decompressing or I'm praying about situations in my life that are going on. It's just been a really great release for me. That gives me energy. I try to eat decently. I'm definitely not perfect in that area, but I try to make sure that I have time for myself to do things that I enjoy. Lately, that's just been paint by number here and there when I have the time. We're obviously doing some house redecorating right now, so that's taking up both of our times. It's been a lot of work.
Amen.
But yeah.
Okay. You do stay busy. There's no doubt about that. We both do, but you definitely stay busy. And there are days I wonder, how is this woman still standing upright? Because, as you said, you do all those things, and yes, you exercise, and yes, you know, there are a lot of paint by number, which I think is actually really cool that you do that. I don't think I could do that, but for multiple reasons. But I appreciate that you're able to do it, and it takes away, it seemingly takes away the stress a little bit. Do you feel that does help a lot, doing things like a hobby like that?
I think so. One thing I'll tell you, when I used to do community mental health work, and just to give people an idea, I talked about this on a previous episode, on the EMDR episode, but we were literally going into situations where we had no idea what we were going to find. I mean, and we were going out to people's houses. So someone could have just gotten an argument before you walked in the door, and you're experiencing the fallout of that. You show up, and you know the kids you're working with just got suspended from school for a week for bringing something to school they weren't supposed to. I mean, just endless amount of stress, and nothing was predictable. I would bake a lot during that period. What I realized was that I was baking because I knew that if I followed all the steps, I knew exactly what result I was going to get. And that was therapeutic for me at that time to do that. I realized that was why I was doing it. And now, and something I've realized about myself is that having some type of creative outlet for me is helpful, because I'm so analytical and so consumed with like problem solving and thoughts and things of that nature, that to shift gears over and to do something that's more creative and fun and spontaneous is a good balance for me, to balance out the analytical side and the creative side, which has been a great thing. I went through a season of rock painting a little bit before the pandemic and a little bit while we were dating. I've kind of gotten away from that now, but that was fun. I like arts and crafts a lot, so I tend to do some type of artsy thing.
Yeah, it's fun to watch. I think you do well with it. So let's go back. Let's talk for a moment, young Carrie. Let's go back to at what point, let me just ask it this way. At what point did you make that decision of, hey, I think I'll be a therapist? That seems like a dandy idea for life. Let me try to help other individuals with their problem. When did you decide that? Why did you decide that?
When I was in high school, I was super interested in sign language, and there was a college, it was actually a junior college at the time, near where I grew up, that had a sign language interpretation program. I had been to a church in the area that had a sign language interpreter. That was my bent of where I thought I would be going with my life. And it was a 2-year program. I could get out and do interpretation. Then I was in a psychology class in high school, and I thought, this is the most interesting stuff that I've ever read in my life. And I just wanted to digest all of it and read everything I could get a hold of. I'd get a hold of old psychology textbooks and just read them. I knew that there was something to that. So when I went to college to study psychology, my professors were either involved in research or they were counselors. I didn't like research. I thought I could do counseling. And so it wasn't this big aha moment or calling. I think like with so many times in our lives, God uses the little pieces and puts them all together. And then later we look back and go, oh, yeah, God was really in all of those little situations that I didn't realize kind of steering me on this path. When I remember that when I saw my first client in practicum, so we had one semester, and then our second semester, we were already doing therapy. That was terrifying. I didn't know anything at that point. However, when I got done with that first session, there was just this feeling that came over me of like, this is why I'm here. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. This is why I'm alive. That moment for me, it just solidified everything that I was doing, and that's how I became a therapist. I couldn't imagine really doing anything else.
Do you remember your first, case, your first person?
I do. I do.
And were you like terrified? And don't let them know you're terrified, but were you like scared?
I'm so appreciative to this woman. She was very gracious to me, and I think that she got something out of it, even though I didn't feel like I was able to give her a whole lot. And I think it was more just about her showing up, saying some things out loud to someone that she didn't talk about to other people, receiving some type of supportive feedback, and just having a safe environment that she was able to go on and do different things in her life, I guess is the best way to explain it. And it was also where I learned that couples counseling wasn't for me. That wasn't with her. I was seeing her individually, but I saw a couple couples and I was like, I don't really feel comfortable with this. This doesn't seem like my cup of tea. Sure. So I stayed away from that.
Wow. And then from there, you worked with another company for a while, and then at some point you went into your own private practice. Was that also scary?
Yeah, it was terrifying. It really was, to go out and start my own business. I don't come from a family of business people. I don't rub shoulders in my day-to-day life with entrepreneurs. So thinking about leaving a very stable job that it didn't pay great, but I knew exactly how much I was going to get paid. I had health insurance, I had benefits. And to step off and leave that for something that was less certain was scary. Funny story, I had a couple of different side jobs while I was building my practice initially, and one of those was that I was a grocery shopper. I was a personal shopper for Shipt before people really knew what Shipt was. They would see my shirt in the grocery store and they would say, Shipt, what is that? Because places weren't doing that. There wasn't Kroger pickup. This was several years ago. So it's kind of a funny story that I was probably one of the first 1,000 shoppers for Shipt. I was done. I had shopped on a Saturday after working, I think, my full-time job during the week because I was still at the full-time job. I shopped for maybe 10 to 12 hours on Saturday to make some extra money. And I was in a JCPenney store. I saw this little ring, and it said on the ring, if God brings you to it, he'll bring you through it. I wore that ring until we got engaged, actually. So from the point I started my practice, it was always an encouragement for me that I knew in my heart and in my spirit that God wanted me to do this. And if he called me to do it, he was going to bring me through it. So that's
really cool.
Yeah, I remember when I started my practice, I was actually mad at God because I had a good situation in with a group practice for a couple of years. So what I was talking about with the ring was when I became fully self-employed, I was working in a group practice, but I was a 1099. I didn't get benefits. And when I jumped off and started By the Well Counseling in 2017, I was mad at God because I had become so comfortable in my current life. I didn't want to leave it. I was like, okay, I finally, in 2 years, I had built up my practice. I had a consistent, steady flow of clients. And then things changed with the group practice. So I was kind of at this fork in a road where I was forced to make a change. I'm so thankful for that now. I'm thankful that I did branch off and start my business. But I remember going out to the parking lot, praying, walking around the parking lot of this big office complex that we were in, just saying, God, why? Why, God? I don't want to go do something different. Like, I just got used to what I'm doing right now. What I felt like the Lord was trying to teach me in that moment was comfortable is for when we get to heaven. And if we want to follow Christ, we're going to have to be okay with being uncomfortable, stepping outside our comfort zone. You know, when he calls us to the water, like Peter saying, okay, I don't know how this is going to go, but I'll take that first step.
Yeah. So you had to walk. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you did not sink, did you?
No, I didn't. And I will say, too, that I had 2 supportive friends that were therapists at that time. One was my friend Sarah that I had on the EMDR episode, and the other was Jessica, who was on one of our early episodes on diagnosis. Yeah. I asked both of them, do you think I can do this? And they said, absolutely. You can do this, Carrie. It's not going to be that bad. And I was like, okay. You know, so I had God on my side, but I also had supportive people who knew that I could do it.
What would you tell a young person that is thinking, maybe not even as young as 10, maybe they're in high school and they think, I'm kind of crazy. Maybe I'll be a therapist. That's a great idea. You know, I don't know why you have to be crazy, but what would you tell them?
Wow. If there is a high schooler out there that wants to be a therapist, my biggest thing would be to encourage them to go sit down with a therapist for their own work individually. Sure. I honestly think that is what has made me the best therapist that I am today, is going to therapy for myself, because it's allowed me that opportunity to be on, you know, the other side of the couch, like you said, and experience what it's like to go through some of those hard and painful moments, the days that you don't want to show up and you don't want to talk about your problems, or you question, does this therapist really care about me, or is she just kind of like cashing a paycheck here? What's that really about? I think that would be my biggest recommendation, because you can get all the trainings in the world, but if you are not self-aware yourself, that's going to hinder your work. I really believe that you can't take clients to places that you haven't been yourself.
So you're saying that a therapist that you admire and listen to them, or you sit on the couch and talk to that therapist?
No, I'm saying you get therapy for yourself. Because that would be a good indication of what it's like to hold that emotion in the room. Even though it's your emotion, you're not holding someone else's emotion. I mean, certainly you could.
But it's a start.
It's a start.
Okay.
And I have had people contact me that were interested in becoming a therapist and had a question here or there, had needed to interview someone for school, and I've done some of those as well. Don't 50 people email me now about how you want to be a therapist. I don't have time for all of that. But, you know, I think it is helpful to talk to people about who are interested in doing what you're interested in doing. I will say that it's a process to become a therapist besides just going to school. You do have to go to school, but then on top of that, there's a whole licensure process afterwards that takes you, depending on what state you're in, it takes you about 2 to 4 years to complete.
For the licensure?
For the licensure process after school.
How long for the schooling? Or does that vary?
You would go to undergraduate school and get a degree like in psychology or social work, and then you would go to graduate school and get a master's in counseling or a master's in social work if you wanted to be a licensed clinical social worker.
That's good. I just feel like there's probably someone out there that they're listening, and maybe it's not a young person, but maybe a mom or grandma, like, oh, that's a great idea. So, hey, try to help them out. But obviously, you don't tell me what happens day to day per se. You are very, very basic. You do not tell me individuals' problems. You are very HIPAA compliant for that listener that thinks that maybe you tell me everything. You do not. It's usually a scenario of, I sure wish people would go and look at what their insurance covers, or something very broad that way. But in the idea of not breaking any HIPAA laws here, what is a difficult personality for you? What is a challenge even?
A challenging person to work with?
Yeah, not just that. I'll make it a two-part question because typical me, I have 50 questions that go to one. Yeah, what is a typical, what's a challenging person to work with, as you said? And also, what is challenging about your job? And maybe that's one and the same, but something that every day you have to deal with it. It's just part of the deal.
That's a good question. I think probably what's funny about this question is clients that are listening are probably like, oh, I'm the difficult one. And they're probably not at all like, no, you're not the difficult one. I think people who want to stay married to their symptoms and say, oh, well, I just have anxiety. This is the way it is. And this is the way it's going to be. I tend to not have those people because they've read my marketing and they've probably gone somewhere else. I don't tend to keep people who have poor boundaries because I have pretty good and strong boundaries myself. So if there are clients that don't respond well to boundaries and I have to set a boundary with them, they tend to self-select off and not come back, which I'm okay with. I think that's the thing about this job in terms of being in private practice. Where I was before, you have to work with whoever comes in the door when you're working in a community mental health setting. However, when you have a private practice, you're marketing to a certain type of clientele. It's very different feel. So you tend to attract people that you enjoy working with. And I would say that the same is true for me. Ultimately, people who don't want to change probably are the most difficult to work with. And I probably am not the best fit for working with them either because I tend to work well with people who say, okay, I know this is going to be hard and I know it's not going to be easy and I know I have a lot to work on, but I really want to get better. I really want to heal and I'm willing to do what it takes to do that, to get to that result. So that tends to be who I end up attracting and working with. As far as difficult situations that happen with the job, sometimes it's difficult when you enjoy working with a person, but then they drop out of therapy for whatever reason. So sometimes you might be working with somebody for a long time, and then they move out of state. And it's hard to say goodbye because I've had people that I've worked with for a couple of years, and then you feel sad because they have to find a new therapist and start telling their story over again. But also, I feel a sense of loss of not being able to work with them anymore. And I think people don't really talk about that or think about that from the therapist's perspective a lot of times. But we have feelings too. And I think about people that I haven't seen in years, but I remember working with them. And if they come to mind, I just pray that they're well and that they're doing good wherever they are, because a lot of times I never hear anything back. I don't know, how life is for them now.
Sure. Now, I imagine that must be difficult because most of us like to be around people who are well off, doing well, not well off, but doing well, maybe that too, but doing well. But most of us, I think, we gravitate towards people who are healthy, who are, life's great, life's dandy, they're upbeat, whatever it is. And yet in your case, you're helping someone, and then when they get to the point where life's dandy, well, you don't hear from them anymore. Just the same, you get to hear the issue, whereas the rest of us, maybe we get to hear how great life is and what they're not saying. So that would probably be difficult.
Yeah, when you finish working with someone and you get through the whole process, it's a little bit like a graduation. You know, there's this closing of the chapter and it's bittersweet.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I'm so proud of you for all the hard work that you put into this. And
Sure.
you're ready to like spread your wings and fly now. So it's sad to see them go, but at the same time, very happy because it means that they're functioning well on their own. And that's always the goal for me. For therapy is to have people functioning well on their own.
Sure.
So it's kind of weird, like in this career, getting fired is a good thing, you know, for the right reasons.
Right. It's reversed.
Yeah.
It's reversed for sure. And that's neat. Well, Carrie, I have enjoyed interviewing you. It was definitely on the fly. I think I wrote down 5, 6 questions maybe and just kind of ad-lib through. I'm not the type, for those of you who know me, I am not the type of person who just does things on the fly like that. I like to prepare a little bit.
I do too.
Yeah, and you do too. So for us, this is very different. And I just thought, what a neat concept. What a funny thing for us to do because neither one of us are like. And so for you, that's very daring because I can come up with some off-the-wall questions and can be a bit on the ADD side or all over the place, if you will. So you didn't, I hope, didn't have to hone me in too much. I hope the questions were good. I had fun, and I hope that you did as well. And most of all, I hope that the listener enjoyed this a little bit.
Yes. I think that they will. I think probably a lot of people have questions about what is it like to be a therapist. So this was a little bit of a glimpse into that.
Sure.
But you know, there's one more thing that we forgot.
Oh, no.
The story of hope.
Yes, we
Would
did
you
not do
like
that.
to tell our listeners about the story of hope? I think it's a joint story, really, between the both of us. Can we tell them about your job?
Oh, yes, by all means. By all means. For those of you who can't see inside this speaker that you're listening to, I had this look at Carrie like, what are we talking about? Where are we going? Is this a famous question I should be asking or answering? I'm a little lost.
So at the end of every episode,
That's
as
right.
you know, because you were on before,
Yes.
we like to tell a story of hope, which
That's
is a
right.
time where you received hope from God and another person.
Yeah.
And I guess there's 2 sides to this story. So I
There
can
is.
start and
Sure.
tell some of my side, and then you can
Sure.
finish up the story. How
That'll
about
be
that?
great.
From the point where we were dating, Steve and I were praying about him getting a new job. That was important for multiple reasons. One of the reasons was that for him to, once they started going back into the office, he would have to drive from where we're at in the suburbs into downtown Nashville. And that was going to be, an hour minimum probably each way for him to make that trip. We knew that commute was going to be stressful, but also he was just looking for a change. And there were very specific things that we prayed for, and always we knew that it was going to be in God's timing, right? Whatever happened, we're like, okay, God, we know that you're good, and we know that you have a plan for Steve, and we are just asking for you to come through at the right time.
Yeah, and that definitely happened. Things work. And I spent a long, long time in the search process. And I'm sure a lot of people who are listening have, if you've ever looked for a job, now is not the easiest time. But it's not an easy search anyways. That process isn't easy. So, and I didn't want just any job.
Sure.
I wanted to be particular. I wanted to enjoy what I was doing and to have a challenge. I'm just that type of person. I like a good challenge. I was able to find that, and I enjoy it. I like it. I go in each day, and every day there's something new to learn, And of course, maybe you're thinking, well, you just started this job not that long ago, so you're in the honeymoon period here, Steve. And that's true. However, there's always something I like, and also I like being around people a little bit. So I get to see people, I get to smile, I get to see people where I work who've been healed.
Yeah.
And so they come, I see them on one side come in and they're looking a little, sad or in pain or whatever. And then they come out the other side and I can't promise you that they feel 100% because chances are they just had something done that didn't feel too great, but they get relief. And so I like seeing that. I like seeing, people getting help. And so I found some of the things that I could do and be useful in that way. So nothing against my former job, just, sometimes we need a change. Sometimes that's just the way life is. So anyways, that is my hope. I don't know if that was the perfect way to answer that, but we'll go with it.
No, I think it's a great story of hope because it's about keep praying and keep believing that God has good plans and good things for you. And he's going to show up when you least expect it at just the right time to answer that prayer. So we are both very thankful and very blessed.
Sure. I will say this because it's just a thing with me. Carrie's going to roll her eyes at me for this one, but it's okay. If this went well today, you can thank Carrie. If it went bad, well, you can email me and gripe and complain. It's all my fault. But if it went well, you thank her.
He always says this about food. Whenever we take food somewhere, that's what he likes to say. Well, Steve, we're going to have you back on episode 50 because it's around our anniversary. And
that's so
we're going to do things that we learned in our first year of marriage.
Oh, so many things.
And then we're going to go eat seafood.
That's my favorite part. I cannot wait. We need a moment of silence just for that.
Well, thank you so much for listening, our faithful listeners. And if you know anybody that wants to be a therapist, maybe you can pass this episode along to them. They might like to know a little bit about what a day in the life of a therapist is like. God bless everyone. Hope for Anxiety and OCD is a production of By the Well Counseling in Smyrna, Tennessee. Our original music is by Brandon Mangrum, and audio editing is completed by Benjamin Bynum. Until next time, may you be comforted by God's great love for you.